Welcome, dearly beloved anointed ones. The people who scare you the most are never loud, never chaotic, and never trying to prove anything. They're the ones who already survived what was meant to finish them. Here's a fact most people don't like to admit. History shows that the individuals who quietly disrupt entire systems are rarely the ones throwing punches or shouting threats. They're the ones who learned, adapted, and outgrew the environments that tried to break them. Every major shift, spiritual, social, or psychological, has always started with someone who was underestimated, watched closely, whispered about, and slowly pushed into isolation, until the watchers realized the situation had reversed, and that's where you come in. What makes this moment uncomfortable for your haters isn't your success, your confidence, or even your resilience. It's the realization that you didn't just survive, you learned. You observed patterns, you noticed who benefited from your silence, who panicked when you stopped explaining yourself, and who suddenly had nothing to say once you stopped reacting. That's when things shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, the kind of quiet that makes people uneasy. There's a strange thing that happens when someone grows without asking for permission. The people who once felt powerful around them start feeling exposed. Suddenly, the same ones who tried to provoke you are avoiding eye contact. The same ones who had opinions are now too busy. The same ones who swore you wouldn't make it are jogging in the opposite direction like they left the stove on at home. Funny how courage disappears when control is gone. And let's be honest, this isn't about fear in the movie sense. Nobody thinks you're coming with a cape, lightning bolts, or dramatic background music. This is deeper than that. It's the discomfort of realizing you can't be manipulated anymore, that your reactions are no longer programmable, that your calm isn't confusion, it's clarity. And clarity has a way of making liars, pretenders, and energy leeches suddenly remember important appointments elsewhere. There's also a bit of irony here. The same people who once underestimated you now spend an unhealthy amount of time watching from a distance, pretending they don't care while caring a little too much. If denial burned calories, they'd all be in phenomenal shape by now. So if you've noticed people switching up, pulling back, or acting strangely polite after years of disrespect, don't flatter yourself, but don't dismiss it either. What you're witnessing is not admiration and not hatred. It's recognition. And recognition is the moment when the power dynamic officially changes. Stay right here, because what you're about to hear next explains why this shift happened, what it unlocked in you, and why the ones who doubted you are suddenly finding exits instead of excuses. Number 1, you're dangerous because you're no longer controllable. There's a quiet power in someone who refuses to be tamed, a force that unnerves even the people who once thought they had full control over you. Most people live their lives being influenced, nudged, and manipulated without even realizing it. They let fear, guilt, or approval dictate their decisions. But you've crossed a line they never expected. You reached a place where no one can pull the strings anymore. That freedom isn't loud, but it's lethal in its effect. When people realize they can't sway your mind or bend your will, they instinctively retreat because the old tools they used to dominate you no longer work. What makes you truly dangerous isn't anger, aggression, or flashy displays of strength. It's the calm awareness that you're fully in control of yourself, that nothing outside of you can steer your emotions, decisions, or path. That's terrifying to anyone who's spent years profiting off your uncertainty or fear. They thrived when you questioned yourself, when you paused for approval, when you hesitated because you weren't sure if you had the right to move. Now every hesitation they counted on has vanished, and they can't adjust. They don't know how to respond to someone who operates entirely from their own power. Being uncontrollable also exposes patterns people worked hard to hide. The systems, lies, and manipulations that once seemed unshakable suddenly crumble under your observation. You don't have to confront them to see their weakness. You exist, and your mere presence reveals it. That's why they run. Not out of respect, not out of fear of you personally, but because your independence threatens their control over reality itself. And here's the ultimate truth. You don't even need to prove that you're untouchable. The fact that you've stopped bending, stopped apologizing, stopped justifying, and stopped reacting in predictable ways is all the evidence needed. The moment you claim your self-governance fully, the moment you refuse to be anyone's puppet, you cross into a zone that most people can't comprehend, and that in itself makes you dangerous. Number 2, your presence destabilizes weak authority. There's something unsettling about you that has nothing to do with what you say or do. It's the way you exist without shrinking, bowing, or over-explaining yourself. People who rely on titles, status, or loud confidence feel it immediately. You don't challenge them directly, yet their authority starts wobbling the moment you enter the room. Not because you're trying to take power, but because you expose how little of it they actually have. Weak authority depends on obedience, silence, and people who don't notice the cracks. You notice everything. What throws them off is that you don't perform respect. You're not rude, but you're not impressed either. You listen, but you don't submit your thinking. That alone is enough to unsettle someone who's used to being obeyed without question. They sense that you see through the act, the rehearsed confidence, the borrowed importance, the position that looks solid on the outside but is hollow underneath. You don't need to point it out. Your calm awareness does the damage for you. People with fragile authority often confuse control with leadership. They expect fear, admiration, or dependency to hold things together. When you show up grounded and self-directed, you quietly break that illusion. They can't intimidate you, they can't impress you, and they can't bait you into reacting. That leaves them exposed. Suddenly they over-explain, over-assert, or try too hard to remind everyone who they are. The shift is subtle but unmistakable. You didn't change the dynamic. They did, because they felt threatened. What makes this powerful is that you're not competing for their position. You don't want their seat, their approval, or their spotlight. That's the part they can't process. You're not a rival in the traditional sense, which means they can't fight you, discredit you, or dominate you the way they're used to. You exist outside their hierarchy, and that makes their structure feel unstable. Weak authority survives on illusion. Your presence dissolves illusions. That's why some people grow distant, defensive, or strangely cautious around you. It's not personal. It's instinct. You remind them, without saying a word, that authority without integrity cannot stand for long. Number 3, you survived what was designed to erase you. What most people don't understand is that survival alone isn't the measure of strength. It's the clarity that comes after surviving that makes someone formidable. You've been through trials that weren't random. They were engineered, whether by people, circumstances, or systems, to test, break, and erase your sense of self. The pressure, the manipulation, the betrayals, they were meant to make you doubt yourself, to bend you into someone weaker, someone manageable. But you didn't just endure. You emerged intact, aware, and sharper. That alone shifts the balance of power. Every attempt to control you, every trap meant to stunt your growth, and every attack on your confidence was recorded, processed, and ultimately neutralized by your resilience. And that resilience isn't just physical or emotional. It's intellectual, spiritual, and strategic. You learn to recognize patterns, anticipate deception, and move without needing permission or approval. That's why the people who tried to erase you now feel exposed. They realize the very mechanisms they relied on no longer work. You survived, but survival transformed into mastery. The danger you represent is subtle but undeniable. You don't have to prove anything to anyone because your history speaks for itself. People can see it in your calm, your decisiveness, your refusal to be shaken. They may smile, nod, or pretend everything is normal, but deep down they understand that they underestimated the depth of what you endured. They also realize that you learned from it. Everything they thought could weaken you instead became a part of your armor. And here's the most unsettling part for anyone who tried to manipulate or hurt you. Your survival didn't just protect you, it rewrote the rules of engagement. You're no longer a participant in the game they set up. You're an entirely new player, operating on a level they can't touch or predict. That's why they step back, hesitate, and sometimes disappear. They wanted someone pliable, someone they could manipulate, someone they could erase. You aren't that person anymore, and that's why surviving isn't enough. They fear what comes next. Number 4, you see through emotional manipulation instantly now. There was a time when emotional games worked on you. Guilt could slow you down. Silence could make you overthink. Mixed signals could keep you stuck, trying to decode intentions instead of trusting your own understanding. That version of you was responsive, empathetic, and willing to give the benefit of the doubt, even when something felt off. Manipulative people relied on that. They counted on your patience, your kindness, and your habit of explaining yourself. But something shifted. Experience sharpened your awareness, and now the tricks don't land the way they used to. You don't need long conversations to sense when someone is trying to twist your emotions. You hear the tone change. You notice when accountability gets replaced with excuses, when concern is really control wearing a softer face. You can feel when someone is fishing for a reaction instead of speaking honestly. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Once you've lived through enough manipulation, your mind starts connecting dots automatically. You don't argue with it anymore. You trust it. What unsettles people is how fast you disengage. You don't get loud. You don't try to prove your point. You simply stop participating. That silence isn't confusion or fear. It's clarity. Manipulators thrive on emotional access. When you close that door, even politely, their influence collapses. They sense the shift immediately. The guilt trips sound weaker. The emotional pressure feels awkward. The power they once had over you disappears, and they don't know how to adapt. This new awareness also changed how you value your energy. You no longer feel obligated to carry emotions that aren't yours. You don't rush to fix people, rescue situations, or smooth over discomfort at your own expense. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you self-respecting. And self-respecting people are difficult to control because they don't confuse empathy with self-abandonment. The reason this makes you intimidating is simple. You can't be emotionally hijacked anymore. People can't steer your decisions by playing on your feelings. They can't trap you in endless explanations or false responsibility. You see the move before it's made, and by the time they realize it didn't work, you're already gone. Number 5, your restraint scares people more than rage ever could. Most people assume that power is loud, explosive, and visible. They think someone is dangerous only if they lash out, scream, or retaliate in obvious ways. What they don't realize is that true power is measured by what you can do and consciously choose not to do. Your restraint has become a force people can't ignore. You know the damage you could cause if provoked, but you don't act impulsively. That awareness alone sends a message louder than words or fists ever could. People instinctively feel it, even if they can't explain it. The beauty of restraint is that it creates uncertainty. Those who are used to manipulating, provoking, or testing, you suddenly realize they can't predict your reaction. They can't read your energy the way they used to. You're calm, composed, and deliberate, And that combination is disorienting for anyone who thrives on chaos or emotional leverage. They expected fireworks, and instead they get an impenetrable quiet. That quiet is filled with the knowledge that you could act at any moment, but you choose not to. That possibility alone changes the dynamic. They don't feel safe because restraint doesn't have a predictable pattern. Restraint also signals intelligence and self-mastery. You don't need to prove yourself with theatrics or intimidation. You've assessed the situation, calculated outcomes, and decided the most strategic move is patience. That patience is terrifying to people who rely on impulsive reactions, fear, or manipulation to control others. They recognize that you are thinking several steps ahead, and that level of foresight removes the advantage they once had. What makes this even more unsettling is that restraint is often mistaken for weakness. People think you're passive, hesitant, or unsure. They watch, misjudge, and underestimate you until they see the consequences of crossing you. By then it's too late. Your restraint wasn't absence of power, it was mastery of it. And the ones who thought they could provoke you quickly realize that your calm is a trap of its own kind. Controlled, precise, and ultimately unstoppable. Number 6, you don't need validation to move forward. There's a freedom in realizing that no one's approval is necessary for your next step. Most people wait, sometimes their whole lives, seeking permission, reassurance, or applause before they act. They pause, overthink, and second-guess themselves because they've been conditioned to measure their worth through the opinions of others. You don't do that anymore. You've learned that external validation is optional, but action is essential. You move when it's your time, and that independence is both liberating and intimidating to people who rely on control over others. When you stop looking for approval, everything changes. Decisions that used to be paralyzing now flow naturally. You no longer negotiate with fear, guilt, or expectation. You stop explaining your choices to anyone because you know clarity comes from alignment with your own standards, not theirs. People who were used to influencing you, guiding you, or even subtly manipulating you feel the shift immediately. They realize they no longer have a lever to pull. That absence of influence is disarming because they thrived on your dependency on their judgment. Moving without validation also changes how you handle success and failure. You don't inflate your victories with applause, and you don't shrink from mistakes because someone else's opinion tells you to. You treat outcomes as feedback, not as a measure of worth. That grounded approach is terrifying to people who manipulate through shame, ridicule, or praise. You're no longer on their emotional grid. You're operating outside it, and they can't map you. The real power is that this independence forces others to recalibrate their perception of you. You're not acting out of ego, rebellion, or defiance. You're acting out of alignment with yourself. That's a kind of movement that can't be blocked, controlled, or predicted. And because you no longer need anyone's validation, you operate with a quiet confidence that unnerves those who thrived on your doubt. You've stepped off the leash they thought they held, and that freedom alone is enough to make them step back, rethink, and even fear the scope of what you're capable of. Number 7, you force people to confront their own stagnation. One of the quietest forms of power is showing growth without demanding recognition. You move forward, evolve, and expand, while others remain stuck in the patterns, habits, and mindsets that once defined them. You don't announce your progress or compare yourself to anyone, but your development becomes a mirror they can't ignore. That mirror reflects their own choices, their hesitations, and the ways they've settled for comfort instead of confronting their potential. People don't like mirrors that expose their weaknesses, and the more you grow, the more uncomfortable they become. Your evolution creates tension simply by existing. You stop competing for their attention or approval, yet your progress draws a stark contrast to stagnation. It forces people to acknowledge the gap between what they've allowed themselves to become and what they could have been. That realization is painful. Many will avoid it, pretend it doesn't exist, or even attempt to belittle you in order to protect their fragile ego. But deep down, they know the truth. Your growth highlights their own inertia, and nothing irritates stagnation more than witnessing someone rise effortlessly. What makes this particularly powerful is that you don't have to do anything special to provoke the reaction. You don't lecture, criticize, or brag. You simply continue moving, learning, and becoming. That silent momentum creates a gravitational pull that exposes complacency. People who once felt superior or comfortable in their routines begin to feel awkward, defensive, or anxious. They can't compete with your consistency because it isn't performative, it's intrinsic. The unsettling truth is that when someone forces others to confront stagnation, they become untouchable in ways that intimidation never achieves. Your growth isn't just personal, it's disruptive. It rewrites expectations, shakes assumptions, and unsettles those who relied on your conformity. By refusing to remain small or delayed, you inadvertently hold up a mirror that forces people to face their own shortcomings, and the ones who can't measure up will instinctively step aside. Your presence alone becomes a challenge they weren't prepared to meet. Number 8, you don't chase closure, you outgrow the question. Most people spend their lives trying to get answers they'll never fully receive, obsessing over explanations, apologies, and reasons for why they were hurt. They replay conversations, dissect actions, and beg for validation from the very people who caused the pain. That cycle keeps them trapped in the past, giving power to those who already walked away. You don't operate that way anymore. You've reached a place where the need for closure isn't something you seek. It simply disappears. You outgrow the question before it even needs an answer. That doesn't mean you ignore your experiences or pretend nothing happened. It means you've redefined your relationship with them. The people who once had the ability to frustrate or confuse you now exist on a smaller scale in your world because you've expanded your awareness beyond their reach. You no longer allow unresolved issues to linger in your energy. You've learned to step forward without dragging baggage, without demanding recognition, and without needing permission to move on. That kind of self-possession is disorienting for anyone who thrived on keeping you tied to their narrative. Outgrowing the question also removes leverage from manipulators. They built their influence on your persistence for understanding, on your willingness to wait for apologies or explanations. Once you stopped chasing them, their power evaporated. They realized too late that your detachment isn't weakness, it's control. By refusing to validate their actions with your energy, you've taken back the authority they thought they held over you. What makes this truly unsettling is the quiet finality of it. You don't have to confront anyone, explain yourself, or prove your point. Your life continues, your energy remains intact, and your growth marches forward. That's terrifying to people who once believed they could define you or dictate your reactions. They are left staring at someone who moved past them entirely, someone whose clarity and independence can't be bargained with, manipulated, or contained. Outgrowing the question doesn't just free you. It leaves the others exposed, powerless, and scrambling for relevance in a life that's already left them behind. Number 9, you can walk away without needing revenge. There's a strength in walking away that most people misunderstand. They think choosing not to retaliate is weakness or forgiveness, but for you, it's mastery. You've been hurt, manipulated, or underestimated, and instead of letting anger control your actions, you've discovered something far more powerful: detachment. Walking away isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about reclaiming your energy, your focus, and your power. You realize that engaging with people who thrived on your reactions only gave them more leverage, and the moment you stepped out of that cycle, the dynamic changed forever. Walking away without revenge doesn't make you passive. It makes you strategic. You understand that anger, retaliation, and confrontation are tools that most people overuse, often exposing their weaknesses in the process. You've reached a level where the satisfaction of winning isn't in proving a point or causing harm. It's in maintaining your composure, your integrity, and your trajectory. You continue moving forward while others expend themselves trying to provoke, manipulate, or control you. That shift in energy is terrifying to those who relied on your emotional engagement as a measure of their influence. The irony is that your calm detachment often hurts more than any reaction could. People who expected a fight, a public humiliation, or an emotional outburst are left staring at someone unshaken. Your indifference is louder than words, and your absence from the drama leaves them scrambling for relevance. They realize that the leverage they once had is gone, and there's nothing they can do to regain it. Walking away without revenge also signals self-respect. You've set boundaries so firm that violation no longer prompts a knee-jerk response. You've stepped out of cycles designed to drag you back into conflict, and that self-governance is intimidating. Others can rage, manipulate, or gossip, but it doesn't touch you. You've elevated yourself above the fray, and in doing so you've become untouchable, not because you lash out, but because you simply refuse to play by their rules. That's power disguised as calm, and it leaves the people who tried to control you exposed, powerless, and quietly fearful of what you're capable of next. Number 10. You don't need to prove innocence anymore. There comes a point where defending yourself stops being necessary. You've been in situations where people assumed the worst about you, spread lies, or questioned your intentions, and at some point, you realize that constantly proving yourself only drains your energy and strengthens the narrative they want you to fight. The truth is, your innocence doesn't need validation from anyone who never had your best interest in mind. You've stepped into a space where your actions, character, and integrity exist independently of approval, and that freedom is disarming to those who tried to control the story. When you stop trying to convince people, the dynamic shifts completely. They lose the leverage that doubt gave them. They thrived on your reactions, your explanations, and your desperate need to be understood. Once you detach from that need, suddenly they're left without a target, without a weapon, without a way to manipulate the narrative. Your silence, your focus on moving forward, and your refusal to justify yourself become a force that they can't counter. They realize too late that their influence over you is gone. Not needing to prove innocence also strengthens your sense of self. You stop internalizing their judgments, and instead, you operate from clarity and self-trust. You measure yourself by your standards, not by the opinions or suspicions of others. That's a terrifying realization for anyone who counted on your self-doubt to maintain control. They built scenarios expecting you to defend, explain, or plead, and when you don't, they're forced to face their own weakness. The power in this is subtle but undeniable. You don't have to shout, argue, or create evidence of your integrity. The way you live, the calm in your demeanor, and the way you refuse to engage dishonestly communicates it louder than words ever could. People who tried to smear you, manipulate you, or trap you are left exposed, frustrated, and scrambling for relevance because the one thing they counted on, their ability to provoke a defensive reaction, is gone. You've claimed your space, your truth, and your energy, and in doing so, you've become untouchable without needing to prove a single thing. Number 11. You learn to trust your perception over public opinion. There's a kind of freedom that comes from trusting your own perception instead of letting the world dictate what is real, what matters, or what you're capable of. Most people live as if their reality depends on consensus, constantly measuring themselves against opinions, judgments, or whispers from the crowd. You stop doing that. You realize that the people around you are often influenced by fear, ego, or ignorance, and their view of you has very little to do with who you truly are. That realization changes everything. It shifts power, perspective, and control straight into your hands. Trusting your perception means you stop questioning yourself over other people's interpretations. Lies, half-truths, and manipulations lose their grip because your sense of reality is anchored in your own awareness. You've developed an internal compass strong enough to navigate through confusion, deception, and drama without being derailed. That makes you unnervingly consistent, decisive, and self-contained. People who relied on uncertainty, doubt, or confusion to control or influence you quickly feel exposed. They can't read you anymore, and the tools they used for manipulation are useless against someone who trusts their own insight. What makes this especially dangerous to manipulators and critics is that your trust in yourself creates a kind of immunity. You don't need validation, applause, or recognition to feel confident in your judgment. You act based on your understanding, not what others approve of, which frustrates anyone who thrived on steering your decisions. That calm certainty is disorienting because it's not loud or aggressive. It's quiet, deliberate, and unshakable. By valuing your perception over public opinion, you've effectively removed the leash that others held over you. People who once tried to sway you with lies, gossip, or societal pressures now realize they have no leverage. Your clarity doesn't just protect you, it exposes everyone who attempted to manipulate or misguide you. You operate from a place of self-trust, and in doing so, you've become someone whose decisions, actions, and presence can't be controlled or predicted. That independence is magnetic to some and terrifying to those who relied on your compliance to feel powerful. Number 12. Your calm isn't peace, it's readiness. People often mistake calm for passivity, assuming that someone who isn't reacting loudly is weak, uninvolved, or oblivious. They don't realize that your calm is not a sign of peace. It's a sign of preparation, focus, and awareness. You've been through enough to understand that responding impulsively rarely changes outcomes in your favor. Instead, you observe, calculate, and position yourself where action will matter most. That kind of calm is not indifference, it's control. It's a quiet declaration that you know exactly what's happening, exactly who is who, and exactly how and when to act if necessary. What makes this disarming to others is that they can't predict you. People who thrive on chaos or emotional leverage expect reactions, overreactions, or public displays. Your calm interrupts their expectations. They can't manipulate, provoke, or destabilize you in the ways they did before. They feel the tension because they know the energy behind your calm is potent, but they can't see the plan, the timing, or the full extent of your readiness. That uncertainty makes them uneasy, defensive, and increasingly cautious. Your calm also communicates confidence without words. You don't need to assert dominance through noise or aggression. The mere way you carry yourself signals that you are prepared for whatever comes. That preparation isn't just mental, it's emotional and strategic. You've mapped scenarios, anticipated potential moves, and aligned yourself in ways that make sudden disruption almost impossible to exploit. This is why people who underestimate you often realize too late that they misjudged the level of awareness and capability they were facing. The power of calm readiness is subtle but undeniable. It attracts respect from those who recognize it and fear from those who can't. You're not reactive, you're deliberate. You're not reckless, you're precise, and you're not naive. You're aware of consequences and control. That combination makes people pause, second guess, and retreat without you ever needing to raise your voice or swing a hand. Your calm is the shadow of your capability, and that alone makes you untouchable in ways that chaos never could. Number 13, you broke generational patterns instead of repeating them. Most people unknowingly carry the weight of their family's mistakes, insecurities, and toxic habits. They inherit patterns like blueprints, living lives scripted by fear, resentment, or outdated beliefs. You didn't follow that path. You observed, learned, and consciously chose to do things differently. Breaking generational patterns is not a one-time decision. It's a daily act of awareness and refusal to repeat what was meant to keep you small. By refusing to carry what was never yours to carry, you've disrupted cycles that others didn't even realize were controlling them. That kind of change is uncomfortable for people who thrived on repetition. Those who expect the world, or even family dynamics, to function predictably are thrown off when someone refuses to participate in the same dysfunction. They notice it immediately. Where others bend, you hold firm. Where others excuse toxic behavior, you set boundaries. Where others allow manipulation or control to continue, you disrupt it. Your choices expose weaknesses, hypocrisies, and blind spots in systems that were assumed unshakable. That makes you quietly formidable because your independence doesn't just protect you. It challenges everyone who built their power or comfort on predictable compliance. Breaking generational patterns also forces reflection in others. They see you living differently, thriving where they once stagnated, and they are reminded of the habits, excuses, and compromises they continue to accept. That reflection is uncomfortable because it highlights the difference between conscious growth and inherited limitation. People who once underestimated you may try to dismiss your choices, but they can't ignore the results. You've redefined what's possible in a lineage built on repetition, and that disruption is unnerving to anyone who preferred the predictable cycle. What makes this especially powerful is that you didn't just survive the legacy handed to you, you transformed it. You didn't fight every battle externally. You won internally, quietly building a life that refuses the chains others accepted. Your growth becomes a benchmark that exposes stagnation, and that's why people who once assumed control now keep their distance. You're not just moving forward, you're rewriting the rules, and that makes you untouchable in a way that inherited patterns could never prepare them for. Number 14, you no longer fear being misunderstood. One of the most liberating transformations is reaching a point where other people's opinions no longer dictate your sense of worth or your actions. Most people live in constant tension, trying to shape themselves to fit how others see them, explaining, justifying, and defending every move. You've stepped past that. You no longer bend to expectations, rationalize your choices, or beg for comprehension. You understand that being misunderstood is inevitable, and more importantly, that it doesn't diminish your truth or your power. This shift changes everything in how people perceive you. The ones who thrived on confusion, judgment, or manipulation no longer have a lever to pull. Their critiques and assumptions lose all force because you operate from clarity rather than reaction. They can project, misinterpret, or gossip, but it doesn't touch you. You've stopped performing for approval, and that absence of reaction is disarming. People who once expected compliance or explanation suddenly feel a void. They can't control what they don't influence. Not fearing misunderstanding also gives you a kind of untouchable confidence. You move through life with your energy intact, your focus sharp, and your intentions clear to yourself, regardless of what anyone else thinks. That clarity attracts respect from those who recognize it, and unease from those who relied on your self-doubt. By accepting that not everyone will get you, you filter out distractions, manipulations, and false expectations without lifting a finger. Your peace isn't passive, it's strategic, deliberate, and rooted in self-trust. The quiet power of being understood by yourself first is subtle, but devastating to those who attempted to define you. They realized too late that their assumptions, criticisms, and control tactics no longer matter. Your life is your own, your focus untouchable, and your growth undeniable. You've learned that the need for universal approval is a trap, and stepping out of it makes you someone who moves with precision, confidence, and freedom. Being misunderstood no longer threatens you, it frees you, and that freedom is the most unsettling reality for anyone who tried to contain your truth. You've seen it clearly now. Everything you've endured, every betrayal, every attempt to control, deceive, or manipulate you has only strengthened you. You are no longer a participant in the patterns, games, or systems that tried to contain you. You survived what was meant to erase you. You broke generational cycles. You learned to trust yourself, and you refused to give anyone the power to dictate your energy, your decisions, or your peace. Your calm is deliberate, your restraint is strategic, and your growth is unstoppable. You don't seek approval, you don't chase closure, and you don't need to justify your existence to anyone. The truth is simple. You have become a force defined not by chaos or noise, but by clarity, independence, and a refusal to be owned by anyone else's expectations. Every point we've explored shows the same underlying reality. Your power lies in your self-mastery, your awareness, and your unwavering commitment to yourself. You've become someone whose presence disrupts illusions, exposes weaknesses, and demands respect simply by existing. You no longer play by the rules set by those who underestimated you, and that makes you untouchable in ways few can comprehend. People who once tried to control, diminish, or define you are now left navigating a reality where you are already several steps ahead, calm, collected, and completely unshakable. This isn't a story of revenge or triumph over others. It's a story of claiming yourself, stepping into your highest version, and operating from a level of power that doesn't need recognition to exist. Your journey is proof that when someone rises above manipulation, fear, and expectation, they not only survive, they dominate their own destiny quietly, deliberately, and extraordinarily. If this message resonated with you, make sure you join the movement of unstoppable individuals. Subscribe to the channel to stay connected with the insights and truths that fuel your growth. Don't forget to like the video, comment your thoughts and experiences, and share it with others who are ready to step into their full power. Your journey is your own, but together we rise higher, move faster, and become unshakable. Stay tuned, stay powerful, and keep moving forward. The world isn't ready for the force you've become. God bless you.